Good morning. Today is Thursday, October 3rd, 2013. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. And today is day 27 of my sugar withdrawal program, the T-30 method. So 3 more days left till completely sugar-free. And this drink now has 2 teaspoons of sugar in it, or 8 grams of sugar. So very little sugar, about as much as you'd put into, a normal cup of coffee or tea. And it's just a little bit sweet, but not, it's mostly just like water. Okay, so yesterday I finished this book about the new theory that sugar is the cause of the obesity epidemic, particularly concentrated fructose in sugar. And I sort of mentioned at the end that I have an idea about one way to, I guess, minimize the consumption of sugar in America or in the world. And before I get to that, I'm also reading, I got a couple of books of the history of sugar. And this is a book I got at, I belong to a local Athenaeum, and this is a history of sugar. This book was actually written in 1863 or 1864, so this book is 150 years old, and this is the actual book from 150 years. It's a 150-year-old book that I was able to check out. And it's interesting to read this, just the story, and I'm about halfway through, the story of sugar. This was during the days where slavery had just ended, and as I mentioned in my coffee segment, sugar and coffee both relied heavily on slave labor to produce them. And also this book was written before the introduction of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was introduced in 1886. So, and it's similar when I was doing my caffeine segment. A lot of times when they write a history of something, like they're writing the history of caffeine, it sort of is a precursor to an explosion in something related to caffeine. So that was sort of, when I read those histories of caffeines, that was before the energy drink revolution and these multiple caffeinated products where the caffeine market just exploded in the last 10 years. And so here, this guy's writing a history of sugar, and this is before the introduction of Coca-Cola, which totally changed the demand for sugar by combining caffeine and sugar, actually cocaine and sugar originally. And so the sugar market exploded in popularity. So I just started reading it, and there was an interesting thing on page 8 here. Just talking about the introduction of sugar into England. This guy wrote this book in England. In 1563, Hawkins the Navigator brought sugar to England from the island of St. Domingo. But it was not till the introduction of tea and coffee that sugar came into general demand. So this is my new thinking, and I sort of hinted at it yesterday, and I haven't fully developed this thought yet, but I figured I'd just sort of say it right now, that it seems to me that the intersection of caffeine and sugar is where the biggest bang for the buck is in terms of trying to minimize sugar consumption and obesity and diabetes, etc. According to this, sugar had been around for quite a while, but with the introduction of caffeine into the Western world, caffeine is sort of bitter and doesn't really taste good in its natural setting, like in coffee and tea and even chocolate. But when it's cut with sugar, it tastes good, and or it's at least more palatable. And I think that the combination of the two drove caffeine addiction to larger heights, because it made the drug caffeine more palatable, but it also increased as these guys are saying, the demand for sugar. And with the new theory that this guy and others are espousing, that's sort of one of the primary causes of obesity. And so what I think are there are key times in history. The key thing that has exploded the consumption of sugar was really, the first salvo was the introduction of caffeine and then sugar to make it palatable. And the second, or not, another one was the introduction of Coca-Cola in the late 1800s, where they basically combined sugar and caffeine into a single product and marketed that. And that became, as everyone knows, a wildly popular product. Coca-Cola, it's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest company in the world. And Pepsi and other cola companies, although those are the two main ones. And when Coke first was introduced, well, it was like late 1880s, and then in the early 1900s, and I'm going to study this a little bit more, but there was a big public health outcry actually saying, well, is it safe to basically combine sugar and caffeine, therefore making this psychoactive drug caffeine available to children? And there was a huge case, I think by a guy named Wiley. I'm going to do more research on it, in 1913 or 1911, where the fate of Coca-Cola was basically determined, and the fate of the world, really, where Coke basically won the case that they said, yes, it is okay to mix this drug, caffeine, with, by the way, Coca-Cola had removed cocaine like in 1903, so they sort of quietly removed that because they would have never won that battle. But the caffeine and sugar connection was allowed, and that's when Coca-Cola just sort of essentially took over the world. It's the combination of caffeine and sugar that started then. And then in the last 30 years, you know, the obesity epidemic has really exploded. And let's try to figure out what's happened in the last 30 years in terms of the intersection of caffeine and sugar. You know, several things have happened. One is they started making these cola products, Coke and Pepsi, in larger bottles. So instead of the normal, it was 6.5 ounces for a long time till the 1950s, and then it went to 12 ounces, and then an average bottle would be like 20 ounces, or this is only 16 ounces. Second, in fast food restaurants, the fountain drinks, you could then, you know, as people became busier and ate more fast food, instead of just giving you a Coke or a soda, you could go to the fountain and fill it up yourself. So it was sort of like an unlimited supply. You know, and then third, at like convenience stores, you can get like a big gulp, or this is what Mayor Bloomberg is sort of attacking in New York City, that you could get like very huge quantities of Coke or caffeinated soda. Another thing is basically the rise of the Starbucks phenomena, really in the last 20 years, where I had a section on Starbucks in the my caffeine section, but it seems to me the real draw is not so much their coffee, how well it tastes. Oh, actually, let me continue here. So yeah, so Starbucks, it's not so much that their coffee is better, or, you know, a variety of their marketing things, but they're combining these fancy gourmet coffee drinks that are loaded with sugar, with a lot of caffeine. And to me, that's the main draw. It's, again, the sugar-caffeine connection that people are realizing is A, a huge moneymaker, and B, with the new theory about sugar, is one of the primary causes of obesity, diabetes, and disease. And then the third, you know, the fifth, I don't even know what number I'm on. The fifth would be the rise of energy drinks, which I think are huge. I personally got hooked on energy drinks about a decade ago, and that's really when I started gaining weight. So the theory then is that when you mix caffeine and sugar, like coffee and tea for a kid aren't, I remember, you know, I would never drink that. It's like drinking rot gut or whatever, you know, or battery acid. I mean, who would drink that? But you would drink a Coke because it tastes, you know, it's sweet, or a cola. And I think the caffeine addiction makes the thing taste better. So if, you know, as you get older and you drink coffee, you actually start liking the taste of coffee itself because you associate it with the buzz you get from caffeine. Similarly, with colas or any caffeinated soda, you start associating the taste of that very sweet thing that you would normally never drink. You start liking that because you get because of the caffeine buzz that you get. So it's sort of just indoctrinating us into drinking a lot of sugar. Like when I started this program with these very sweet drinks, I think the normal person would never drink something as sweet as when I put 15 teaspoons of sugar in here. But people do it all the time because they drink sodas, which are caffeinated. So the solution, I might as well just continue here. The solution would be also chocolate. Chocolate in its natural state doesn't taste that good, a caffeinated subject, but when you put sugar in it, it tastes very good. So people become addicted to chocolate. So anyway, the solution would be, there's the libertarian solution, which is just educate people about this, and then you could do this T-30 method on caffeine and sugar, which is what I'm doing, and get off caffeine and sugar. The public policy solution, a very simple one, would be to just don't allow the marketing of products that contain both caffeine and sugar, or a sugar substitute. And that's the end of that, the caffeine, the obesity epidemic, I think, in my view, if what I'm saying is true. Basically, you know, people would not be consuming as much sugar anymore because they wouldn't be associating the caffeine buzz with the sugar. And how it could be done logistically is like for Coke and Pepsi and caffeinated soft drink companies, nothing would change. You would, because caffeine is just an added product to them. So you could still get a Coke, you could still get a Pepsi, you could still get any soda, it just would be caffeine free. It would taste exactly the same. Similarly, like for Starbucks, they could still produce all their Frappuccino thingies or whatever. They would just have to be decaffeinated. And chocolate too, you would just remove the caffeine. Everything would taste exactly the same, but they would be decaffeinated. Now let's say you did want caffeine, because I mean, obviously people are going to want, this isn't going to happen overnight. People are going to be addicted to caffeine. And as I've shown in these videos, getting off caffeine is at least 10 times harder than getting off of sugar. This getting off sugar is like, and now I'm getting the benefits. I'm losing weight, but it's so much easier. Getting off caffeine was very hard. So let's say you wanted to get some caffeine anyway because you haven't, you know, you're still addicted to caffeine. Then you just, you know, you just get a coffee and you get a regular coffee, or you get a regular tea, and you have to add the sugar yourself to it. So it just, it takes a little harder to get the caffeine buzz. And that's the end. That solves the obesity epidemic, in my view. If this connection between caffeine and sugar is the key, which I think it is, actually, it may not be, because obviously they're processed foods. I did the whole section on processed foods. There's a lot of other issues, but for me, they say the correlation is like 0.999% between increase in consumption of soft drinks and obesity. So to me, that's where the bang for the buck is. If sugar is the real danger, I think we should look at, you know, starting with this History of Sugar book, we should look at the connection between caffeine and sugar. This landmark case with Coca-Cola in 1911, had it gone the other way, the world would be a very different place. You know, it would be a healthier world, I think. So we made a mistake 100 years ago, and we can rectify it. And so anyway, I've just been thinking about this recently, so I thought I would just throw it out there now and maybe get some more statistics about it later. But basically the connection between caffeine, sugar, and obesity is I think where what needs to be examined. Okay, so thanks for watching. Today's day 27. I'm almost off sugar and have already lost 6 or 7 pounds in less than a month, and things are going well. Thanks for watching.